Greg, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tim Lee. I'm a research analyst at Red Cloud Securities. I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on silver exploration in Mexico and the United States today. We will hear from Jorge Ramiro Monroy, CEO, and Peter McGaw, Chief Technical Advisor of Reyna Silver. During today's webinar, they will provide an overview and outlook. Then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we will get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss a little fine print. During this Reyna Silver webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements disclosure outlined on page 2 of the company's corporate presentation, and that can be found on the company's website, reynasilver.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors, and participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on Reyna Silver. So without further ado, we have Reyna Silver presenting today. As the company's name suggests, it is focused on silver exploration, and it has projects in Mexico and a project in Nevada. With that, I now turn it over to Jorge and Peter to update our audience on the company.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you, Red Cloud, for giving us the opportunity to talk about Reyna Silver. Also, Peter, great to have you. Thank you for making time to join us today. And perhaps for those of you for whom Reyna Silver may be new, I'll make a quick introduction and overview of the company. We're listed in the Toronto Stock Exchange. We've been a public company for just a little bit over a year. Our trading symbol in the Toronto Stock Exchange in the TSXV is RSLV, and we also trade in the OTCQX in the US under RSNBF, and in Frankfurt under 4ZC. As Tim mentioned, Peter and I will be making a forward-looking statement, so we do recommend you to do your own research. To give you a brief background on Reyna Silver, I had the opportunity to start the company in 2017. It was a private company. At the time, I was very interested in silver, recognizing that silver at the time was maybe $12, $13, $14. It had already been maybe 6-7 years of a bear market for silver, with very little money going into exploration. And the outlook for silver in the medium to long term was, very favorable. And I went to visit with Peter in his home in Tucson, and I wanted to find from him, if he had any advice on how we could start a silver company and what kind of assets to look for. And Peter said to me, look, if you're going to look for silver, you want to focus on projects that have the potential for high-grade silver and district scale. And I said, well, do you have any ideas? And he said, well, as a matter of fact, there are a couple of projects in the portfolio of Mag Silver, which is, as many of you know, Peter is one of the co-founders of Mag Silver. Gigi and Batopilas, which are two projects that I put together. I'm meaning Peter. Peter is speaking to me at this point. And I don't want anyone to think that I put them together. It's essentially I brought the idea with Mag Silver's CEO. At the time, Mag Silver was, with single focus on the Juanicipio project, still, looking at raising additional funds for that project. It's an amazing project. I'm sure many of you know them, and if you don't, it's really worth for you to take a look at. It's about to go into full commercial production. By far the highest grade silver mine in the world, and one that Peter was the main person involved in that discovery. We're very well funded. We have about 11 million Canadian in the bank, and we have 3 assets that we're actively exploring. Our portfolio of assets is there's a few more assets than these, but 3 that we are actively exploring. Gigi and Batopilas are the 2 assets that came from Mag Silver. There are 2 assets that we're currently drilling. At Gigi, we just put out a press release, which is going to be one of the main subjects of today's webinar. This project was actually Peter McGaw's doctoral thesis. It's a CRD in the middle of a very important district in Mexico. Then we have Batopilas, which is a very different project, but equally exciting and equally important. The former silver producer, the highest grade producer in the history of Mexico. Here we also put in a press release a couple of months ago announcing the first results of our exploration. And, we had some excellent first batch of drill results and a lot of more meters still left to drill. And then finally, we have the Medicine Springs project. This is a CRD target. It's in Nevada. It's a project that we've been actively exploring this year and really focusing mostly on generating drill targets for that we might be able to drill next year. To give you a little bit of a sense on our capital structure, we have 100 million shares outstanding. We have, as I mentioned to you before, we have approximately 11 million Canadian in the treasury. We also have a number of warrants that are, most of them are actually the vast majority of them are in the money. We have a very strong institutional investor base. You can see a lot of the names here. Some of the most well-known funds in the space are our shareholders, and we do have analyst coverage from Red Cloud. Tim is the analyst who covers us, and as he mentioned, you can look at his research for his thoughts on our company. And then with this, I'll introduce first Doug Kerwin, who's one of our technical advisors. He was actually one of our first investors in the company. He looked at our projects and was very excited to get involved with us. He just came back to Asia from spending some time with Peter, and was just very excited about everything we're doing with the project for Reyna Silver. Doug is the former VP of Exploration of Ivanhoe Mines. He was an integral part on the Hugo Dummit ore body at Oyu Tolgoi in Mongolia, which is one of the most important copper and gold mines in the world. But he also did work in Mexico exploring for silver earlier in his career. And then I'll introduce you to Peter McGaw for those of you who don't know him. As I said before, he's a co-founder of Mag Silver. I think one of the most successful exploration geologists for silver in Mexico. He really is somebody who's absolutely passionate about silver. I've been to his house. That's his living room that you can see in the background, and all those books that are behind him are about Mexican geology, and he has read them and studied them. He really has an incredible knowledge, but also he has been able to bring that knowledge into exploration success, with a very strong commercial sense. So really very pleased to have you, Peter. And at this point, I'll like to pass the word to you to walk us through the technical aspects of our projects.
Well, thank you, Jorge, and thank everybody who's on the call, and Tim and Red Cloud, of course. So let's move through the 3 properties we're actively exploring. We have drills turning both at Gigi, which is what I'm going to talk about first, and at Batopilas. So Gigi is basically looking for the heart of Mexico's largest carbonate replacement system. So from this part of the district up here, Let's see. This should be able to allow me to do this. Never mind. From the northern part of the district, in other words, the area above the yellow that you see there, the mine was in historic production for 300 years, produced over 500 million ounces of silver and about 8 million tons of metallic lead and zinc combined. Average grade was 310 grams per ton of silver, so that's 10 ounces per silver, and a 300-year virtually continuous mining history. The interesting aspect of that is that this was all for what we call the distal or the fringe parts of how we understand these systems to work. So what we're looking for is the driver for all of that mineralization, and we're looking for it in that yellow area, specifically within that sort of tan circle within the yellow area. That's where we've been focusing, and that's where we've had some pretty exciting results. So here's a carbonate replacement model. This shows you that the mineralization is related to an intrusive stock, which throws off a bunch of dikes and other smaller bodies shown there in orange. And then surrounding that, where it's placed into limestone, you have a large envelope of what we call skarn, which is high temperature alteration caused by the reaction between fluids emanating from the intrusion and the wall rocks, and then the later fluids which bring the metals and come in and overprint and mineralize the skarn and continue outwards into the limestone as sulfide replacement bodies. And so those form chimneys and veins, and they can extend 7 or 8 kilometers from the intrusive stock. Historically, all of the production in Santa Eulalia has come from that solid red zone that you see on the right-hand side labeled Chimney and Manto. And what we're looking for is the missing half of the system, which is that theoretical or hypothetical skarn zone around the intrusive stock. So a lot of work was done by me for my doctorate, by other people in the district, including Mag Silver. We did a lot of preliminary work looking for this source, and Reyna basically has picked up from where Mag left off. Here's another way of looking at this, a long longitudinal section. So off to the left, that's the historically known part of the district that produced 500 million ounces of silver. And then off to the right of that in the middle, you can see the hypothetical intrusive source that we're looking for in that big section of blue rocks, which is Cretaceous limestone. The orange rocks that you see at the top are pre-mineral tertiary volcanic rocks. So they saw alteration. They were affected by the system, but because they're volcanics rather than limestone, they're not mineralized. So essentially, we're having to look through those altered volcanics to look for mineralization in the limestone underneath. And what we had done was a series of we combined geophysics with satellite image analysis, surface mapping, surface sampling, all of that. And we accomplished this drilling program that shows up over here, this series of drill holes off to the, I'm not sure why the whiteboard isn't working here, but off to the, it isn't. So off to the left, we see the large green dots. We started to the west, worked our way around counterclockwise to the east. And finally, when we wound up in holes 23, 26, and 28, we began hitting the kind of dike and rhyolite that we're looking for, that we expect to see close to that source. And also the bottom of that dike was very thoroughly mineralized to altered to skarn, which in turn was heavily mineralized by sulfides. So that mineralization and alteration was affecting the intrusion itself, not just the limestone surrounding it, but altering the intrusion very, very profoundly. So 50 meters thick of pervasive skarn mineralization, of which 15 meters was pervasively mineralized by sulfides, and gave us some very good results. It was actually a series of individual stages or phases of mineralization, ranging from a stage that's very rich in silver. That's at the top, and that's what you see bolded sort of in the middle of the slide there. It's 2 meters of 185 grams, basically, including better than half a meter of 500 grams. That's the silver zone. Below that, you go into a zinc lead zone. Silver grade's a little lower. Zinc grade goes up to 11%. And then within that, there was a zone of very high copper, 1.6% copper. And then below that, we went back into another zinc zone that ran 9.3% copper. And you can see in aggregate, that's 15.8 meters of 2 ounces silver and almost 8% combined lead zinc. So this is the coherent mineralization zone here. Because it's multiple stages and because the skarn shows multiple stages, we can tell this was affected by multiple pulses of fluids coming off of this source intrusion. We haven't quite found the source yet, but we're clearly getting very, very close. And this is the metaphor I use is you've stepped on the dog's leash, so the dog's not running away, and now you can follow the leash to the rest of the dog. I don't know why that duplicated, but it did. Here are just some shots of it. This shows the pervasive skarn alteration of the dike converted to the mineral epidote, and you can see that it's cut across by structures carrying very strong, in this particular case, the high silver mineralization. Here is a view of a different portion of it, showing very strong, very profound zinc mineralization. This is exactly the kind of thing we're looking for. This is telling us we're getting close. And so that's basically our goal now, is to track this back towards the source of the balance of the system. We're going to be taking fairly aggressive step outs because of where the mineralization is. This is fairly deep. It's on the bottom side of this dike, but we have every reason to believe that the 1,200 meters of limestone that sits above this intrusive body is potential host rock for high-grade replacement mineralization, and we still have to find the mineralization, that skarn envelope surrounding the source stock, which we think is somewhere in the very, very near neighborhood. So we'll work upwards and back towards the source from what we found. And the potential is that the mineralization will go all the way from the depth where we found it right up to the surface, potentially coming right underneath those pre-mineral volcanics that are in this particular area less than 100 meters thick. So pretty exciting days at Gigi. That was our phase 1 drilling. Our goal was to find or get close to the source. We believe we've accomplished that. So we're into phase 2 now. That's a 10,000 meter program. And we'll just keep drilling as we try to suss out exactly where the system is. But this is what we've been looking for all along. Batopilas district has also been a very successful exploration program. Batopilas is down in southwestern Chihuahua. Smaller property, just 1.1, about 1,200 hectares, just under that. This covers a significant portion of the historic Batopilas native silver district. That map showing you in yellow, that's our claim situation. The claims that we don't have within there, the largest of them basically sits underneath the town, so you couldn't do anything with it if you found anything there at all. And the other one over to the right, those claims are pretty well mined wall to wall during the Spanish and late 1800s. So we don't think there's a whole lot of potential left in those. The exciting thing about Batopilas is that it's one of the few mining districts in the world where the major mineral is native silver. So the ore bodies were like Brillo pads of crystallized native silver. That's an exceptional specimen example in the upper right-hand corner. And It's a unique style of mineralization. It's extremely high grade. Historically, mining grades in the realm of 2% silver or 20 kilograms per ton were not uncommon. Here's a shot showing of 1 month's production in 1906. That's more than 350,000 ounces of fine silver. Each bar weighs about 25 kilograms. Historically, from 1632 to 1912, district production is over 300 million ounces of silver. Average grade probably 1,500 grams silver, but a lot of it was much higher than that. High-grade production came from more than 30 known veins, and essentially what the old-timers would do is they would follow the structures and encounter pods of crystalline native silver along those structures. The structures are very persistent. Mineralization has been found over a vertical distance of over 700 meters, doesn't show any signs of zoning. And very interestingly, historically, almost nothing except silver has been found. And the gang to this is almost exclusively calcite. So in the old days, when these kinds of silver bars were being produced, all they had to do was bash off the calcite, which broke very easily, take those wads of silver and put them in a furnace and cast them into the bars. An interesting component of our new exploration is that we are starting to find gold fairly consistently in the northeastern part of the district. This is a map zooming in a little more on our claim package and the historic mining area. That's the red veins are the red lines there are the known veins. That green angled line is the Porfirio Diaz tunnel, which was driven underneath the historic Spanish workings in the late 1800s. And so the idea was, in that period of time, they would come in under those veins and mine them from below and then keep mining them to depth. The picture in the lower right, which shows is actually a picture of the blueprint, the original blueprint for the Porfirio Diaz tunnel. They only accomplished a fraction of what they intended to do with the Porfirio Diaz tunnel before the Mexican Revolution interrupted them in 1913. The hydroelectric plant was smashed and the mines flooded, and they've essentially been inactive ever since. MAG came in here. We did some interesting work with MAG, did a lot of detailed mapping, sort of changed the geologic view of the district, drilled some holes. Our best hole was almost 2 meters of 2.5 kilograms of silver, another meter of 3,000 grams silver, including a narrow zone of 20 centimeters that ran almost 2% silver. So we basically kicked off of our program in the second quarter of 21, following up on where MAG had left things behind. But what we did for Reyna was we projected some of these structures into the northeastern part of the district. And last year we came out and did some trenching. We found native silver in outcrop. Once we scraped off the loose soil on the surface, we found structures carrying native silver. One sample of that came back at 42 kilograms silver. Got another sample in the same general neighborhood of 21 grams gold. So our drilling program was designed initially to come in underneath all of those holes. And it turns out that our second hole succeeded in doing just exactly that. So we came in with 3.2 meters, grading 3 grams gold and 700 grams silver. That included a 20 centimeter zone of native silver that ran 10,565 grams of silver. And so that's in the Cobrisa vein. And this is a 2.5 kilometer offset from the last time from where they stopped mining the Cobrisa. So very significant. Find it in outcrop, find it in drill hole. This is the kind of thing that you come back for round 2 drilling on. And then farther to the northeast from that hole, 2134 in the gold zone, drilling underneath where we had high-grade gold samples on the surface, we got 1.5 meters that ran just under 5 grams gold with 11 ounces silver, including 25 centimeters grading 28.7 grams gold. So close to an ounce of gold. This is a zone that has never been drilled before. We've never seen gold mineralization, especially these kinds of grades in this district before. We're seeing the gold associated with the silver. We're also seeing the gold and silver as apparently separate stages within the same vein. So we don't understand exactly what the juxtaposition of gold and silver is yet, but it's a mighty nice problem to have to work on. Just some of those results in tabular form, showing you what we put out in our press release. Would encourage you to read that, and just take more care looking at the numbers that we've got. Remember, this is very early stage exploration in this district. We're just beginning to step out into this northeastern area, looking for the next big high grade native silver ore shoot in this famous old district. So for the next foreseeable future, Gigi, we finished the 12,000 meter phase 1 program, rolled essentially into an 8,000 to 10,000 meter phase 2 program, which is going on right now. Batopilas, our initial program is 10,000 meters. That's what commenced in the second quarter this year. We put out results for the first 1,000 meters. That's what's in that press release that came out. When you hit native silver like that, it's pretty hard to keep it quiet, so you have to get out and talk about it. So we were very happy to be able to do that, and the rig continues to turn. And then at our Medicine Springs project, which Jorge mentioned briefly, we're redefining the extent of mineralization within the system. We did a systematic jasperoid geochemical sampling program over the district. We got just about the last results on that, so those will help us refine and redefine how we want to drill this project, and hope that sometime by mid next year we will initiate a 7,000 meter drilling program there. This is a district where it looks like we're at the very fringes, the very distal most part of a CRD system. We know that there are thicker limestones at depth than what we see on the surface, and we're treating what's been found there, essentially, conceptually anyway, as leakage from a larger system trapped at depth along a major regional structure. So it ticks all the boxes in terms of what we would like to see going forward with our exploration. I'm going to toss this back to Jorge.
Yeah, so thank you, Peter. And I think maybe this slide added it here just really to highlight what the market for silver looks like. You can see that companies at the top, of course, who've been at it for a long time, but you can see the valuations there. And I think the one thing that we want to highlight is through drilling success, silver companies tend to move very high to the upside. And we think all three of the projects we're exploring have that potential for, the really sort of what the market is looking for is a high grade project that's at least 100 million ounces, or more. There's very few of those around the world. And, we just wanted to highlight that with this slide. Just very briefly talking about our board and management, our chairman is Peter Jones. He is the former CEO of Hut Bay Minerals. He's based out of Toronto. He brings a great level of professionalism to our board. We actually just had a board meeting prior to this call. And another thing that I would highlight is we have a team of very experienced geologists that are led by Reyna Ramirez, Manuel Ruiz, and Ariel Navarro, but really a team that has been working with Peter essentially for most of their career. Reyna Ramirez was part of the very early exploration at Juanicipio with Peter and Max Silver, and they're very successful geologists on their own right, and having worked with them now for close to 3 years, it's very evident that they work incredibly well as a team as well. So that's our update. Maybe just wanted to go back to the slide with the catalysts. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that are maybe not super clear from the slide, but we at Gigi we're going to be completing the first 20,000 meters of drilling, and then when we complete that, we still have a budget to drill at least another 10,000 meters. At Batopilas, by the time we finish this first stage of drilling, which is 10,000 meters, we have a budget for another 5 to 10,000 meters. And then at Medicine Springs, as we said, we have a budget for 7,000 meters. So, as I mentioned, we have 11 million Canadian still in the bank, and with close to another 10 million of warrants that are in the money, and some of those have sort of trickle in little by little. But so we're in a good position. Like Peter said, at Batopilas is early days, but we have a lot of drilling ahead, a lot of great targets, and for the next year, we'll be doing a huge amount of drilling and advancing all three projects. So that would be it from my end. And Tim, if anybody had any questions, I see that there's one here already. We'd be happy to take them now.
Great. Thank you very much, Jorge and Peter, for a very informative presentation. And we'll now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. Just a reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. And yeah, we do have a first question here on Gigi. Why do you think that the limestone above the quartzite rhyolite may be mineralized?
Well, that's an excellent question. And the first and simplest answer is that there's already two other major places in the district. The east and west camps, which is the historically known part of the district, are all hosted in that sequence of limestone, exactly the same sequence of limestone above the same quartzite rhyolite. So the district's already proven that package of limestone is an absolutely superb host to large-scale mineralization. The trick is going to be to find how the fluids got from the quartzite rhyolite, where we're seeing it now, through the quartzite rhyolite and up into that sequence. So there's a structural corridor somewhere that fed the fluids from there, from where we've seen it in the mineralized skarn up to the top. We have to figure out what that is. But everything is telling us it has to be there, because mineralization, if this is the source or near the source, it got from there into the two historically known parts of the district, which go literally all the way to the surface.
Great. And I guess one follow-up I'd ask, some of the drilling in the past by MAG had encountered maybe CRD looking mineralization, I guess, on the property. Is that in that similar area, or where was that located, and what would that tell you about kind of targeting?
Well, most of MAG drilled about 4 holes in the area southeast of where we've had our recent exciting results, and that was based on a combination of geophysics and trying to drill under an old fluorite breccia pipe that had been produced back in sometime in the 1800s. Those geophysical anomalies didn't work out. The balance of MAG's drilling, most of their holes was actually drilled along the structural corridor that hosts the San Antonio mine, which is the principal mine in the East Camp. And we got a number of intercepts of mineralized, intrusive and mineralized wall rocks, limestone wall rocks, along that Graben fault. And we had a huge MAG anomaly there, which we drilled, and it turned out to be a pre-mineral mafic intrusion that had a lot of magnetite in it, which is why it made a big gaudy MAG anomaly. But once we age dated it, we realized it was 40 million years older than mineralization, so it didn't have anything to do with what we were looking for.
And a question here kind of following up. could the rhyolite not have capped the mineralization in your area, given that what you've hit is kind of on the underside of it?
Well, obviously that's something we're looking at. Clearly that rhyolite dammed the mineralization. So it controlled where that mineralization affected. So, the interpretation we're giving is that the fluids rose along the lower contact of the intrusion and affected the intrusion and the rocks immediately underneath it. But if you look at hole 23, which was what got us into this area in the first place, and as it turns out, wasn't drilled quite deep enough to get to the quartzite rhyolite because we didn't know it was there yet. But in that particular case, we got identical looking skarn and mineralized skarn affecting a felsic dike, which is probably an offshoot from the quartzite rhyolite. So we're already seeing mineralization in the same neighborhood on the upside. So one of the first things we want to do is drill between those and see if the mineralization from 23 can be traced down to mineralization at greater depth. So we're working both ends. I can't say it's against the middle because we're fairly deep, but we're working conceptually both ends against the middle. We've got a point where we've got very strong mineralization. We've got good signs above us and good signs laterally, so we're going to follow it from there.
Great. I guess one question I'd have, I've seen more companies doing downhole or borehole geophysical techniques to help identify things. Are any of those, would they be useful in this case at all to help target further?
The short answer is yes. We are using some. Actually, the downhole surveying tools that we use today give us a mag signature as we go down the hole. So we don't have to run a special tool down the hole. We can simply look at the results from the surveying instrument, and if there's something magnetic that's nearby, that will work. Some of the downhole electrical techniques that get used, we've had variable success with. We're contemplating using that, especially now that we've encountered thick, consistent mineralization in hole 28. This gives us something to work with. Getting a contractor at the moment is not easy, but it's something we'd like to do.
Great. And one of our viewers asked what I was also thinking of, but are you deepening hole 23 or hole 24?
We're trying to see if we can get back into hole 23. The hole was drilled obviously several months ago, and getting back into a hole is not always easy. But the idea is we definitely want to drill deeper in the neighborhood of 23, whether we can do it through hole 23 or 24, or we just have to drill a new hole, which we might do anyway, just because it would give us a different geometry and we understand more about what's below the bottom of 23 than we did when we drilled 23. So that's all in planning right now.
Okay, great. And one kind of overarching question, but why did Mag Silver part with the property?
The easiest explanation is to say that both Gigi and Batopilas were victims of Mag's success at Municipio. Juanicipio is on track to be one of the world's biggest and highest grade silver deposits. Back in 2016, 2017, when we were starting to put the thing into production and recognizing that it actually was a lot bigger than we thought when we found the deep zone. The board basically said, we got to keep our powder dry to make sure that we can bring Juanicipio home and get that puck in the net. And so everything else got backburnered. And, Jorge's timing was excellent. Because he basically came and said, well, I'll take these off the back burner for you. I'll give you a big chunk of Reyna silver. We'll raise the money. We'll go do the work. Give us the property and give us some of Peter's time, and we'll see what we can do to daylight value that way.
Great. And one other question, obviously in the hunt here, looking at, obviously you'd step perhaps to the north toward the areas that are being mined there, but would you also step to the south to look further south of the intrusion that you've encountered so far?
Absolutely, because we only have a couple of holes into the intrusion. We don't really know what its geometry is, and we still think there's at least one intrusive phase younger than the one that we found that's actually what's driving the system. We think they're all offshoots of the same differentiated evolving magma body, but the fact that this intrusion is so heavily altered and mineralized says, especially with multiple different stages, says that there's something else nearby that's pumping the fluids into this area, and this will lead us back to it, but we're not quite there yet. That's why I say we've stepped on the dog's leash and it can't get too far away, but we still have to follow that leash back to the dog.
Great. And I guess I would circle back. Well, one question that I had thought of is related to the, obviously you did drill a couple of holes in the concession that you'd optioned from Union Mining that's further a little bit to the northwest. And you did encounter some mineralization there. Is that something that you'd follow up on, or what are your thoughts about what you're seeing there?
That is something we are following up on. Okay. But that's much more distal style mineralization. So that would be, instead of stuff at the bottom of that 1,200 meter limestone package, that's stuff that's up at the top. And so we're hoping if we can latch onto some mineralization higher in the section that, we can work at linking those back in as well, and using vector information that we get off of that to help us focus in on exactly where the center that we really want to find of the system is. So, and if we find something that, the best of all possible worlds is that you can track mineralization from the surface back to the source, because then you can if you can do that with a drill rig, you can do it with mine workings. And, if you can produce and pay your way as you go to depth, that's obviously the way to go from a mining standpoint.
Great. And then shifting over to Batopilas, obviously you encountered some high-grade silver there, but you also encountered some gold. What does that tell you about the system that, or the interpretation there of what you're seeing?
Well, Batopilas and its relatives, which include things like Kongsberg in Norway and the Cobalt Gauganda district in Ontario and the Alhambra district in New Mexico, these are called 5-element vein systems. And so, silver is the principal element, but they contain some or all of cobalt, nickel, arsenic, uranium, but typically they don't carry much gold. And the fact that we're finding gold, and the fact that the gold seems to be, the gold is associated with quartz, the calcite is associated, the silver is associated with calcite. They're occupying the same structures. They don't necessarily occupy the same part of the same structure. We are seeing some very silver-rich native gold. We're seeing a little bit of gold in our native silver. It suggests that we may actually be looking at either a new evolution style of one of these, or that we're looking at two systems that have bumped into each other and are occupying the same plumbing, and probably did it at different times from different places. So these are all ideas that we're bandying about at this point. We're letting the results lead us to wherever our happy place happens to be. If it's an ounce of gold, we're happy with that. If it's multiple kilos of silver, we're happy with that. It's a big, well-mineralized system.
Great. And one kind of overarching question we've run into, there've been some things in the news in the industry with Mexico and some companies running into a little more challenges with permitting and things. Have you had any challenges getting drilling permits, or has it been smooth sailing?
Yeah, so maybe I can. Oh, sorry, Peter. you want to go?
No,
first?
no, I've been talking long enough. You can.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, Tim, specifically for exploration, there really hasn't been any issues in general. I mean, there's some isolated cases here and there, but as a matter of fact, our permitting for all our projects has run out extremely smoothly. I think at Gigi initially took a little bit longer, just because we were doing the permitting right in the thick of COVID, but still it was done maybe in 3 months instead of a month and a half or 2, which is normal. And then at Batopilas, it really was like maybe our permits came in maybe about 8 weeks. Now the specific case that you saw in I think that's been in the news is Fortuna Silver. I've been sort of trying to speak to my contacts and see what it all means. At the moment, it's sort of an isolated situation. There's been maybe 2 or 3 other instances, but from dozens and dozens of producing companies. I just came back from Mexico, and I did get a chance to speak to people in government and at the mining department. They did assure me that they have a policy of like just allowing companies to conduct their business. The new president, well, not that new because now he's basically halfway through his term, has certainly he is populist and he has he has spoken against mining, but the actions taken are not haven't been let's say nothing compared to what's happening in other parts of Latin America. I think for this Fortuna Silver is going to be an interesting thing to see how it gets sorted. It's now with the courts, and I think if it's worth digging into it a little bit more for investors. I haven't had a chance to other than what everybody else is reading in the news. I don't have any additional insight. So it's definitely something we're monitoring very carefully, but I will say for exploration, it's not going to affect us in any way. Perhaps permitting, environmental permitting in the future will be a bigger issue. Now, keep in mind, in Mexico historically, environmental permitting, you could permit a mine into production in as little as a year. Compared to I don't know, in Canada it can be 5, 6, 7 years. In the U.S., parts of the U.S. can be more than that. So, these new government does have an agenda that's more, environmental. So that's the main excuse for not renewing the permit for Fortuna Silver. I personally haven't looked into it in depth. Certainly something you need to look at, and I think also, Tim, unfortunately, it's something that's not just in Mexico, not just in Peru or the country. I think it's just all over the world. More and more you're encountering these situations, and again, these silver projects are so rare, so few of them that are actively being explored, and then when some of those run into permitting trouble, it's definitely something to watch for.
I'd elaborate a little bit on that and point out that the problems that are making the news are in areas with very substantial indigenous populations. And you can see from the picture that's on the screen right now, that's what Gigi looks like. There's no population of anybody, indigenous or otherwise, on that property. So our community relations and the population density in the places that we're working are substantially smaller than they are, for example, in Oaxaca, where the problems are happening. And there's a lot of noise being made about nationalization of lithium, and as as a key element. But if you look at the statements made by the outgoing president of the Mexican Chamber of Mines, so far nobody's found a lithium deposit in Mexico that's economically feasible. So it seems to be political posturing rather than a real threat of nationalization. At least that's how I read.
No, you're right, Peter, and the people I spoke to, I mean, with sort of close to government or in government, it's unfortunately it's an easy target. These Canadians are coming to take the resources, but the reality is, you're seeing it with the Fortuna Silver mining in Oaxaca. There's overwhelming support from the community for the project, because it's I think it's something like 13,000 direct jobs. And the other thing I'll tell you is that I'm originally from Mexico City. I have relatives who have MBAs from Canadian or Australian universities who work for banks who don't make as much as geologists. These are really well paid jobs. It's when I started hiring geologists, as the owner of a company, or as you were, wow, like, this is more than I expected. But on the other hand, you really recognize that the mining jobs are extremely well paid, and I think that's another reason why I think, specifically with this Mexican government, they're not going to take anything too drastic. It's I think last time I checked, it was something like 5 million direct jobs for mining. You're talking about, let's say, each head of the family supporting on average 4 or 5 people. That's it's a good chunk of 25% of the population of the country. So it's but it's certainly something that we're very alert and always like looking at how we minimize all our risk on that front.
Well, Jorge, one comment to make is that
Yes.
Hiring geologists is like anything else. If you want quality, you have to pay for it.
Yeah, it's true.
And I can see that there's another question that's popped up. What are we looking for at Medicine Springs? Well, at Medicine Springs, we're looking for a CRD system like Gigi, like the Santa Eulalia district. Instead of trying to find the heart to begin with, we're working from the fringes of the system back towards the center. So we know from regional stratigraphic studies that there should be a lot of very favorable limestone underneath what's exposed on the surface. So we need to understand what the host rock sequence looks like, what the plumbing looks like, and we think we've got a good handle on the plumbing. And then we got to figure out where the fluids moved within it. So there's a lot to work with there.
Great. All right. Well, I think that concludes our Q&A session here. I'd like to thank Jorge and Peter from Reyna Silver for presenting today. And thank you, everyone out there, for tuning in and for your time today.
Yeah, and maybe, Tim, before we finish, if
Sure.
you don't mind, I do have a few more copies left of this wonderful book called Silver Magnet. I don't think you can see it very well.
Oh.
It's a book that's written about the Batopilas project. It's really well written, amazingly. It's a account from the son or the grandson of the gentleman who started Batopilas. And if anybody who's listening to the webinar would like a copy, send me an email at I'm just trying to remember if it's but you better send it to my email directly. It's Jorge, as you see it on the screen, Jorge at reynasilver.com. Jorge at reynasilver.com, and we'd be happy to send you a copy, and then you get to know a little bit more about it's a really fascinating historic project.
Fantastic. All right, great. Thank you very much. And just a reminder that Red Cloud Securities will be back tomorrow Wednesday, November 24th, when our webinar series continues as we present Pure Point Uranium at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks again for the excellent presentation today and for the excellent questions out there and for your time today. And enjoy the rest of your day.
And for those of you south of the border, have a happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, indeed.